Welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show. So this is around 9:10, just after Holby City on TV. So we're going to be carrying on looking at some of the greatest games of Garry Kasparov this week. So it's carrying on basically from last week. Welcome. I'll just mute there. So this is actually part 7. Okay. I am going to get non-reflective glasses, by the way, if you're following this on stream on YouTube. That is a plan, because yeah, there are glasses that take out blue reflection even now, quite advanced. Okay, so this game I'd first like to go over is Kasparov against now his name is actually probably quite tricky to pronounce. It sounds like Hjorth. Greg Hjorth. He was born in Melbourne, Australia. So Greg Hjorth. He was joint Commonwealth champion in 1983. In 1984, he was awarded the IM title. So he represented Australia in 3 Olympiads: 1982, 1984, and 1986. And is actually apparently one of the world's greatest experts in the field of mathematical logics. Unfortunately, he died a bit too young. He died of a heart attack at the age of 47, according to Chess Games Com. That's pretty sad. Okay, but a great player, yeah, a great player. Let's see what happened in this game. Kasparov was white. So this is in the World Junior Championship, played in Dortmund in 1980. So Kasparov kicked off with d4. We have d5, c4 was played, e6. Actually, let's put on a connection to Livebook as usual and a kibitzer. I think we can risk having Eugenio without killing the machine. Knight f3. We have a Tarrasch defense. So the Tarrasch defense creates this huge tension in the center, this pawn tension. Often the risk for black is the downsides of the isolated queen's pawn. But of course there's upsides. It's worth playing for active piece play. Particularly black's bishops are often, quite active in the Tarrasch, and the rooks can often find lines. So here, what does Kasparov do? He takes actually on d5, which is the main move, and now he plays g3. So this system with g3, I believe it was Rubinstein which popularized this approach. It's improving king safety usually by fianchettoing here. We have knight c6, bishop g2, knight f6, knight c3, bishop e7. So all of these moves are pretty standard so far. Actually, in my book, these are actually the top moves now. Bishop g5. It's here there's a slight deviation. c4 is actually the second most popular move. Usually c takes d4 is played here, and the evaluation is meant to be slightly better for white. For example, it could carry on to black's got the isolated queen's pawn. Often games carry on like this in the Tarrasch. So you can see that white's trying to sort of create a blockade point on c5 in the dark squares generally, but this is a very common position to start from with bishop c5 here. Very common. There's 92 games at least, high level games, just from this kind of tabia, this start position here in the Tarrasch. But this game slightly goes on a slightly rarer path. Actually, black kind of releases that central tension with c4. But by the way, as you're joining on YouTube, hi there. I'm hoping my preview is less goggle-eyed than last week. Is that correct? I'm just going to pose that question. And on my preview it seems okay, but I am going to get better glasses soon, which are non-reflective. It was quite amusing. Okay, but anyway, sorry. Coming back to this game, question for the stream there though. Okay, Now this position here, black has released this central tension, and in doing so obviously shields against this pawn. The frontal pressure of the isolated queen's pawn is shielded against. There is a slight downside of this approach though in this position. White still can actually put a lot of pressure on d5. Okay, so how does he do this? How can white put pressure on d5? White does so immediately, knight e5. So it's difficult for black, a little bit uncomfortable here, in that if black ever takes here, then it unleashes huge pressure on d5. And actually I think white's basically winning a very, very important centre pawn at minimum. And even if black takes like this, this is a very, very pleasant position for white. There's a nice advantage here for white positionally. Okay, so this is undesirable for black to take on e5. Yeah, because of this continuation, this kind of continuation. So black actually tolerates this knight on e5 here by playing bishop e6. It's a slightly passive position, and this probably explains why this whole c4 isn't really as popular as cd. This hasn't got the feel really of the Tarrasch defense. The Tarrasch defense, I mean, that you really kind of accept both of them together. You get the downside of the isolated queen's pawn, but you usually get good bishops. Here the bishops are a little bit on the passive side, especially the bishop on the e6. It's a little bit passive, and white can also reinforce now knight on e5 with f4. And you might think, well, isn't it weakening a little bit? E4, it's only a weakness if it can be exploited, really. White's got more initiative here, so it's actually difficult to really punish white for this. You might also think this diagonal is a little bit weak. You know, if there was a rook here, then sure, black would have knight takes d4 and bishop c5, but this diagonal isn't weak enough at the moment for that sort of thing. We have knight takes e5, and this is quite a committal structural decision. It's a structural decision, and it's kind of forcing now. We do get quite a few pieces off just after knight takes e5, very forcing. After f takes e5, black plays now knight e4. This is probably the one of the best moves now, because if we move the knight back, then that just loses a pawn. It's not really playable, this position. This position is not playable for black, just loses a pawn. So black's really committed to either knight e4 or g4, and he chooses knight e4, which hits this bishop on g5. Knight g4, you might think, well, we can take here. And here, it's still good apparently for white with queen d2. Not taking here, I don't think this works. Bishop takes. Bishop takes, there's always knight e3. So the point is here, if we had this position, I mean, queen d2 and white's got a small, no, not a small advantage. I think it's approaching a clear advantage. The knight can be kicked back, and in fact made to beat a misplaced piece. And white's still looking forward, I believe, to breaks like e4. I mean, this is like the main threat, like e4, or maybe even preparing it. But e4 is going to come, and it's going to be bad for black. So black plays really the only move, the only continuation idea is knight e4. And it's a clever little trick, actually. It's hitting the bishop on g5. So the first thing to note is, if knight takes e4, we actually take on g5 here with black. And then black still has got a fairly solid position. d5 isn't an issue. That'll be fine. Most of black's issues would have gone. Okay. So white plays bishop takes e7, and black is not the idea is not to take on e7, because that just loses a pawn. We just take a pawn there. No. The idea after bishop takes e7 is knight takes c3, hitting white's queen. Clever stuff. B takes c, so we end up in this position with rather a lot of simplification has occurred. But now white is able to get in e4, and there's still significant pressure on d7. Sorry, not on d7, on d5. But it seems at the moment, hang on, it's not that much pressure, surely. And it's a really, this is a really interesting move now. Kind of, you might think, provocative to black. White actually plays the move a4. Why would he want to do that? Well, black actually has a queenside pawn majority. It is keeping a bit of a lock on black's potential kind of attack with b5, b4. It's kind of ruled out here. Black doesn't want to end up isolating pawns to do that, like a pawn. So it rules out b5 for sure. If that really is a strategic threat for black, it probably is one of black's major threats actually. So a4 locks down on b5 for sure. We have rook fd8. And now a really natural looking attacking move, which at minimum you'd hope would weaken the dark squares. White plays queen h5. So if g6, of course black's weakening the dark squares around his king. So black leaves that. He leaves that queen there. It's potentially annoying. But no, it's not just hitting f7 and h7. And note, white enjoys this pressure on f7 with this f file. That is a trump card for white. But the queen's also potentially exerting an influence on d5. So there's three potential targets here. f7, h7 and d5 potentially. So if black wants to kick the queen, it will be at a price here. Black didn't. He actually just played rook ac8. But let's imagine black tries to kick the queen. This already would be a big advantage to white with queen h6. There's ideas of just swinging a rook in. It's basically very dangerous to consider this. It's very, very dangerous. And also white can also double rooks. Doesn't have to commit to rook h4. Can put more pressure on f7. It's very comfortable. So, you know, black is not too keen to play g6. It's a little bit on the pointless side. We have rook ac8. And we still have the move rook f4. Preparing to double rooks. And it seems as though there's a problem emerging here. That f7 and d5 are under great pressure. For the moment though, after rook c7, you might think, hold on, what about this little pawn here? This rook can't move. The pawn's there. Just be hanging, right? If black's got enough reinforcement for d5, this rook surely cannot move. So did he or didn't he move the rook? White's play, what would you play if you were Kasparov? So what do you do here with white? To those watching, those interested, to try and guess the move, try and guess it now. Does white dare double the rooks? Hasn't black got enough defense on d5 to mean that if rook f1, doesn't it just lose a pawn? Or do you think Kasparov played that? What do you think Kasparov played? It's interesting because actually Kasparov did actually play rook af1, so well done if you got that. 100 points at least. Interestingly, the engine suggestion is actually g4, which is I'm not. Let's have a look what the threat is if black didn't do anything. Let's have a look. What's the idea here? What could this possibly give? It gives rook h4 as the idea. And h6 is more difficult because then we can just take. So that's another interesting way of playing the position from the engine perspective, was just to play g4. Idea, g5, rook h4. Interesting attacking maneuver to make note of. Okay, but Kasparov actually played rook af1, which is another very, very strong move. Now black, perhaps, should consider a defensive move here like h6, it seems. But he took on a4. But is there a danger? Is there really a danger? What has really happened here? Isn't black solid enough? The key question on these 2 points. Yes, we've got 3 pieces looking at f7, but we've got 2 defending f7 and 2 defending d5. We've got basically 1 and 2 on d5. Nevertheless, after e takes d5 is played, black has a problem. He has to sacrifice the exchange already. The reason is, if he takes with his bishop, then white can simply take that bishop off and then just smash through with rook takes f7, and it's end of game. It's a mate in 7. This position is impossible for black. It's actually a forced mate in 7. This is a quick way to end it, but the slow way with the mate in 7 here, with the queen coming back, rook takes c7 is possible, and if takes here, we're mating and mating 3 like that. And there's nothing much to show after that. In fact, if queen a is not possible, let's imagine h6. Well, we can just take the rook if nothing else. Yeah, don't have to show the mate in 7. So black is basically forced to do the exchange sack, rook takes d5, to still hold up f7. Is this blockade working? Is this exchange sack blockade working? If it is working, then sure, black's got a load of pawns over the queen side, and especially this a pawn. You might think these would be dangerous in the long run if white's not breaking through. But Kasparov has a way of breaking through, which is played at move 22. There's quite a breakthrough move that is played in this position, and it's a great move. It's a great move to break down the blockades. Sometimes you do have to be quick to break down the blockade before the opponent benefits from that blockade and starts, say, advancing pawns menacingly. Sometimes you've got to take action quickly against the blockade, and for sure Kasparov is quick to take action here, even in this world junior tournament when he's kind of young. But so white's play here. Yeah, some of you have guessed it. 100 points for guessing this move. e6. Now, one immediate point about e6 is this diagonal is dangerous, isn't it? Or is it? No, really, it's about f8. If takes, then we don't play queen e8, because actually that's covered, right? We play rook f8 checkmate. So black is threatened with now rook takes f7, and also the bishop's attacked. Those are the 2 threats, at least. So bishop takes e6 seems to address both. And now white has 2 very, very powerful moves available. Well, it's a move order thing. But the idea here is, okay, so white's play here. What's the idea? Yeah, you follow up here with the top move from an engine point of view is rook h4, but it's still with the idea of d5. Rook h4, h6, d5. Kasparov's doing it in a slightly different move order, and it's still very strong. Just play d5 immediately. You play d5 immediately. Black tried to pin this pawn to the queen, but in playing d5, white has released that d4 square. It's now a slightly different move order. Rook h4 is played, and it's tricky for black. If black plays bishop takes d5, then check. This position, check. Queen takes g7 is very dangerous for black. Very dangerous. There's an idea of even rook e4 trying to deflect the bishop for mating. So this is really, really tricky. If bishop e6, black, remember, black's the exchange down, so his king safety is also a major concern in this variation, and he wouldn't last too long. You know, white can basically smash through, it seems, to get to the king, especially if he was playing really accurately like this. He could win the queen like this. The queen's a loose piece at minimum. There's lines there that white's just smashing through, basically. If we just rewind this, so bishop takes d5 isn't too pleasant when white is crashing through with queen h7 in a nutshell. Black tried check, actually. We have rook f2, bishop takes d5 now, and still, although queen takes h7 is attractive, in this particular position, there's even a much stronger move available. So quite versatile Kasparov is to the very rapidly changing ideas of positions, the nuances very rapidly changing from moment to moment in a game, where there might be something stronger than queen takes h7 in this particular position. But I've kind of hinted at a new possibility that d5 generated, which Kasparov became obviously acutely aware of, probably when he played d5. So there's quite a crushing move here. White to play this move. What would you say white plays here? Rook d4. Black has got a weak back row here. So basically, also, this kind of nearly a pin here. If bishop e6, this isn't played, then check would win the queen, right, at minimum. Or we could just take the queen here even stronger because of the back row mate. So the bishop can't move. So we have rook d7. But now, the final move of the game, and it makes a pleasant aesthetic creation. The game becomes an aesthetic creation, basically, with this final move by white. And it kind of dents, I think, the whole concept of black playing c4. I mean, this whole game is actually quite impressive, because it seems as though white didn't let go of this kind of advantage he had from the opening, really. He was relentless, and this final move seals the deal. It really does. In this particular configuration, there's a move which finishes off black. So 200 points if you can guess this final move. It's an elegant game, it's got to be said. It's an elegant game. Alright, for 200 points, if you guess rook f5, that is the final move. It is the most clinical move. This pin, it's massive. Black resigned here. If he plays g6, we take here. We're hitting the queen, so we can play actually this, because we've got d4 protected. We're rook up, yeah. Give yourself some points for this alternative queen e5. That looks very, very tempting, because it's got an idea of queen e8. But black has a defense here with king f8. So it's not as strong. If rook f5 now, f6 is possible. It's not as strong as that other move, just rook f5. But give yourself some points, because that's the second best move, but only a small advantage with queen e5. This is the real bone crusher, rook f5. That enormous pin on the queen there. The bishop can't move without losing the queen. If the queen goes here, there isn't perpetual check. We can have a check, but the king is going to escape here. In fact, we can't even check on e2. this position, the queen can just drop back actually here. Yeah. So rook f5 sealed the deal. So I thought that was quite a dramatic game because it showed how an early decision meant, okay, black didn't have the classic isolated queen's pawn of the Tarrasch defense, but gave white a kind of bind in the center and an aggressive f file. You saw the f file was aggressive and the pressure on d5 was aggressive, and those 2 points, f7 and d5, seemed to be under great scrutiny. Kasparov sacks the a4 pawn, luring the queen away. He's winning the exchange. This blockade doesn't last at all long. Kasparov blows up that blockade immediately with that move e6. It's powerful stuff. When we saw that blockade removed with e6, it's horrible. Black was in a mess after. Let's see, this is to recap. After e6, black took the bishop, then d5 got the d4 square. Black ended up in a losing pin, basically. He throughout that, he also had echoes of, you know, back row weakness. There was no air given to black's king during this game either. So I hope you found that game interesting. Kind of dramatic punishment for black's opening play, which didn't seem that bad on the surface. I think sometimes you've got to, the Tarrasch defense, you've basically got to embrace fully. If you're going to play the Tarrasch, play the Tarrasch. You have the isolated queen's pawn. It's well worked out strategy. Usually it's in a dynamic balance. Although it's not too popular nowadays, having said that, at the Super GM levels, it's not considered that as solid as, say, Grunfeld or Slav, as far as I can gather. And you'll probably agree that Slav and Grunfeld are the top openings of the Super GMs. The Tarrasch is not so popular. I mean, it's got its issues, basically, which can be exploited with accurate opening play to gain a significant advantage sometimes. So anyway, let's go on to another game. So game 2 that I'd like to show you is against Eugenio Torre. Torre. So Eugenio Torre is 64 years old. He's a Philippines player. So he was born in Iloilo City, the Philippines, and the strongest Filipino chess player of his generation. So this is information is from chessgames.com. There's also information on Wiki. So this is 1980. Torre reached a peak rating 3 years later after this game of rank 20 in the world on January 1983. And he was in the world's top 100 players for most of the period of 1975 until 1992. So he got the IM title in 1972, and he became actually the first Asian to earn the title of International Grandmaster. So he accomplished that at 22 years old. So this is a fantastically good player in his own right. He also beat Karpov in Manila in 1976, which is actually on my YouTube channel. I've video annotated that game, I believe. He was a friend actually of Fischer, Eugenio Torre, playing some training games with him, acting as a member of his team during Fischer's 1992 match with Spassky. And later, unfortunately, he conducted radio interviews with Fischer, which unfortunately I heard some of them, and that they weren't very nice. Yeah. He also established the Eugenio Torre Chess Foundation. Okay, so yeah, check him out on Wiki. A fascinating player, fascinating bio actually to check out there. Okay, so he's still around, 64 years old at the moment. So this game was played in Baku, 1980, in Azerbaijan. So Kasparov's home place, basically, hometown. Let's have a look. D4 for Kasparov. Torre played C5. And we're actually getting a Shaq Benoni. Sorry, did I say Shaq Benoni? No, this is actually being classified as a Schmidt Benoni by the chess-based classifier. I'm going to have to bow down to that. It looks to me like a Czech Benoni, but maybe it's also called a Schmidt Benoni. I'm not entirely sure now. So bishop e7. This locked pawn chain usually implies strategies for both sides, that black would like to get rid of the dark square bishops to weaken white on the dark squares, and white usually would often like to get rid of the light square bishops to weaken black on the light squares. That's the usual plan with this very fixed lockdown structure already. We have knight f3, bishop g4, knight d2, knight a6, which gives the idea that black might be interested in later like a b5 plan. Bishop e2, knight f6, a3, just in case the knight, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure the knight was ever threatening knight b4, so it's more to do with later b4 and trying to break down black structurally than trying to prevent knight b4. So both sides castle, g6, we have knight e1, bishop d7. Yeah, with knight e1, white does want the exchange of light square bishops in principle, because remember, black's pawns are all on, a lot of them are on dark squares statistically, so it will weaken black on the light squares. But the bishop retreats, knight d3. We notice this nice centralized knight is putting pressure on two key squares, knight e8, b4 putting more pressure on c5. We have bishop b2 putting more pressure on e5. So Kasparov is putting the pressure on black's position. Black is just bolstering e5 with bishop f6, queen b3, we have b6, bolstering black's position. Isn't black solid enough here to withstand the pressure? King h1, we have bishop g7, f4, even more pressure on wanting to get rid of this bishop. We have bishop h6 actually being played. Rook f2. f6, just trying to make sure this bishop's blunted on this diagonal. Now interesting, b5 gaining a bit of space. Bishop f1. We have now g3. Bit of manoeuvring here, bishop c8, bishop g2. And yeah, white has greater space. But where is the where's going to be is there going to be a breakthrough here for white? White plays a4, cementing his space a bit. Now one break could actually be useful just to open up the a file later, a5. Knight g7. Black doesn't want to play a5 or anything because that pawn will be too weak later, surely. He doesn't end up with a backward b pawn. So we have bishop c3, so white is permitted this a5 basically. Knight h5. White's going to do it in its own time. If he's going to play a5, he's doing it in his own time here. He actually plays queen d1. And potentially with queen d1, you might think actually this plan might be viable in the future to try and get rid of the light square bishop. That could be one idea, potentially. Or like this, bishop f3 to g4, just to get rid of that light square bishop. Okay, we have knight g7. Now a5 is used here. Knight e8. Now black is not exactly, black's not threatening much at the moment. So in these sort of positions, it might be worthwhile to get one's pieces into optimal places before a break occurs, a strategic pawn break. So we see a move here which just improves white's position, arguably a little bit. Queen e2, bishop g7. Now Kasparov opens up that a file, a takes b, and interestingly cements his space advantage with f5. Interestingly, what he's trying to do is encourage black to take so he can get this e4 square Black plays bishop h6, h4, rook g7, knight f1. Yeah, black's pretty passive. A little bit of an infiltration. This rook's repulsed. Now we have bishop h3. Now the queen plays to f3, knowing that the rook's taking care of this one. So we've got a staring contest of rooks going on here on the a file. This is a manoeuvring game. There isn't any immediate disaster for black, but black is suffering a space disadvantage. Now sometimes that can mean you can look forward to weaknesses being created by your opponent if pieces get exchanged off. But it's difficult here for black to exchange off pieces. If he does take on a2, it seems that white will just get that a file, and it will be kind of useful for white. Maybe he can even get the queen back in time. So black's not too keen to exchange off rooks, it seems. He plays queen c7. So black's kind of huddled here. Look at all these pieces kind of huddled together. We have king g2, bishop g7. White might have been threatening knight g4. So in advance, bishop is taken away from the danger there, if there was a danger. Okay, so here, bishop g4. And now actually black commits to g takes f5. This is another structural change, which essentially, after bishop takes f5, white is accomplishing one strategic goal of weakening black on the light squares. But fascinatingly, he doesn't play e takes f here. That e4 square might not be as important as indicated before now. Although both moves do have advantages, either e takes or queen takes. I've actually chose queen takes. We have queen d7. And now here, h5. So saying to black, well, if you do take here, then I might consider this to get the e4 square. Now if black doesn't do anything, knight g4 and h6 might improve things for white significantly. So black actually did take now. And Kasparov did actually take, well, he can't take with a rook because he'd be losing this one. So it's basically forced to take with the pawn. But he gets that e4 square. Bishop h6, knight g4, bishop g5. Now this fawn pawn is installed. h6, the fawn pawn, the dreaded fawn pawn. It's difficult for black to maneuver a knight to hit h6. We can't use d6. How does this knight ever help? How does anything ever help? That pawn is not going anywhere, it seems, for the moment. But what is white actually threatening here? Okay, rook e7. We have rook fe2. As though, why is white building up the pressure on e5? Why? King f7. Knight df2, as though there's going to be the knight's coming to e4, which it does. Bishop c1, knight e4. There is immediately an idea with this of taking here, to be able to take this, and it looks dangerous because then there's all sorts of nasties. And it's bad to take on a2 because I think white's just going to get the a file as a new trump card. So black's in a difficult position. What he does do is, maybe in advance of this tactic, he defends d6. Let's just see this in action for a moment. Remember, black can't move this because he's losing the rook. He hasn't got too many actual moves available. He can't move the knight because he's still losing the rook. I mean, what does he do? Sorry, rook takes. What does black actually do here? If he moves the bishop back here, yeah, that's possible. Okay, what does he do? He plays rook ed7. The king comes a bit more to the center. Now we have king e7. And now we have a forcing sequence. Rook takes a7, rook takes. The bishop is evicted back to g5. If the bishop goes back to a3, I think we have an incredibly nasty pin here, rook a1, which black will be faced with bishop b2 and losing material. So the bishop is virtually forced to go to g5. Now, there's an interesting little combination with the king here, involving the king in that location, and maybe the rook. But it starts with knight takes g5, f takes, which weakens e5. So three pieces are looking at e5 here. So guess what? At move 51, white's play 100 points if you get the right move. What do you do here? Kasparov, what do you do here? Yeah, okay, I'm going to say now, so 100 points. Yeah, knight takes e5. It seems the most promising is by taking on e5 the knight. Now, we don't play rook takes e5 because black's fine there. No, the idea is actually bishop takes e5, hitting this poor innocent knight on b8. This is troublesome for black, because if knight d7, well, then we've got a nice discovered check, winning the poor innocent rook. Pain. Not giving black much of a choice here. Black tries knight d6, but now what's the idea? What's the idea, you wonder? Quite clever. It's very clever. Very clever idea. White to play here. Can you calculate it? I'll give you a few seconds. It's a series of crushing, forcing moves. Okay, yeah, it's f6 actually. This pawn is actually quite dangerous. It's only 2 steps away from queening. Black can't go over here because he just loses the knight. So the only move really is king. Well, from a human point of view, to play on is king d7, which is what was played. Well, the engine reckons king f7 is stronger. White now just takes on d6, and the thing is about this position, after check, now f7, and it's difficult for black to do something about this pawn. If he played actually rook a1, if he plays knight d7, in this position, the strongest is apparently d6 check, like this, and then taking it and we're queening. If we play rook e7 immediately, this is still good for white as well, actually. We don't queen here because of rook f1 check, but king e2. Yeah, I think black's in some sort of zugzwang actually. Yeah, because the king, I think, is marching up and just winning, because the king's getting this pawn, and then we've got another pass pawn away. But no, it's more elegant than that. The way Kasparov is playing this position, I believe. Yeah. So f7. Yeah, on knight d7, the most clinical way of playing this is, if this did happen, which it didn't, is d6 check. That's the most clinical. Because then we're not getting any hassle like we did before. This pawn is basically like queening or losing the knight. So, but anyway, in the game, after f7, we have rook a1 setting this little trap for winning the queen, yeah? But now this is just extinguished with king e2, and black resigned here. Torre resigned here. If he tries to keep this hassle of this sort of tactic with check, we have king e3. And then what? If we check here, king e4, we're queening. Because of knight d7, actually we use this clinical move here, d6 check. We don't use rook e7. That is good, but it's better to play d6 check. And this is basically queening after rook e7. Okay, so the game actually ended on, though, king e2. What was tried after this f7 was rook a1, and after king e2, black resigned. A bit of a meaty game, this one, bit of manoeuvring. So eventually Kasparov did a breakthrough, a sacrificial one. This piece sack on e5. Yeah, it was well calculated. So nice manoeuvring beforehand, and a well calculated piece sacrifice. Okay, so I hope you found that game interesting. Bit of a long one actually, 57 moves. Yeah, there's a bit of quiet before the storm, but white did seem to have this space advantage. So it's interesting how he eventually exploited it at the right time, waiting for that moment to pounce. You might ask, did black's king, my question at the moment nagging me is, black's king, did it need to go to e7 earlier? If we go back, just rewind for a moment. Probably king e7 was a mistake, you know. There was an evaluation shift here from black being like -2, nearly +2 for white, to being over +3 after this forcing sequence of taking rook e1 for taking. It's a dismantling of this pawn chain, because if we're forcing the bishop here, then we're forcing this, we're weakening e5 all the time. Yeah, e5 becomes fatally weak after king e7. If black was trying to play on, it seems there were better moves. Say this, and it's not entirely clear. So yeah, this, I think my intuition's saying to me this is wrong, and the engine's saying that's wrong as well. Actually, now that I look at it, that did seem to be a major mistake. But the forcing sequence to destroy this pawn chain, if we look at this again, he took on a7, he forced bishop g5 essentially, so that knight takes g5 is weakening that pawn chain, and then bang, with the king there, the unfortunate placement of the king on b8 is unfortunate, very unfortunate. That this is just this particular position is just by losing, it's just losing by force. Interesting. Okay, so the third game I'd like to show you, and the last game tonight, is against Ralph Akesson, again in the World Junior Championship 1980. Now Ralph Akesson, while we're here, just a quick bio, if there's a quick bio. Last FIDE rating 2452. He's 55 years old, from Sweden. Akesson, Sweden. Awarded the IM title in 1981, a year after this game, and the GM title in 1995. He was the Swedish champion in 1985 and 1999. He was the European junior champion in 1980 to 81. He's also a senior international master in correspondence chess. So a great player, all round. So let's see, d4 from Kasparov. We have knight f6, c4, e6. We have a queen's Indian defense. Kasparov's unusual adoption of a3. Usually g3 is played here, but Kasparov specialised a little bit in a3, which is the second most popular move, just to stop these things like bishop b4 transpositions. It's a sort of Nimzo territory hybrids. So we can get to play knight c3 now without worrying about the pin. d5, c takes, knight takes is the most common, not to block in this bishop just yet, keeping that bishop open on diagonal. This is standard move so far. This is a standard move, bishop e5, to cause some disruption for black, taking away the c6 square rather than bishop d3 immediately. It's more desirable to have the pawn on c6, it seems. Most players think that's the most popular idea. e4 now. I'm hesitant to say anything concretely, by the way. You might be aware of that. I'm increasingly hesitant to say anything for definite because there's so many resources in chess and ideas change and verdicts change. So I think it's better to be more flexible in any comments you make on games if possible. That's deliberate because chess is so vast. It's kind of almost, you shouldn't do it. It's audacious to say certain possibilities are great or whatever. But yeah, this is just a popular way of playing the position. So c5, white castles. So we've got this nice pawn center, it seems. C takes d, these two pawns together, which some people believe this duo is a desirable duo to have. Because in one respect, black's always going to be worried about d5 or e5. The worries are in black's side. You know, if white has the right time for either d5 or e5 usually, that's going to keep black on his toes. Knight d7, we have queen e2. White's not committing the two pawns yet. He's keeping them together, and in fact he's just strengthening the pawns. They're strengthened by the bishops. Queen c7, there's no entry point on the c file, you'll notice here. There's no real entry point on the c file. We have we have queen e3, which looks like an unusual looking move, queen e3. It's reinforcing the center a bit more, and it's giving some possibilities maybe of queen f4 at some point when the queen's not there, maybe, or switching over when possibilities arise. So for the moment, knight f6. Now with the queen on e3, this might be a nuisance actually at some point, you might think. Anyway, but this is extinguished. Knight e5 extinguishes any knight g4, covering g4, but also making way for the f pawn potentially. And we have this b5, f4, and structurally white might now be threatening f5 to kind of weaken black's pawn structure or create f-file pressure. Queen b6. Looking down this diagonal, very interesting. If f5 is played here immediately, bishop d6 is an immediate threat then. Bishop takes e5, and it might be not so desirable for white here to allow this possibility. What Kasparov does is prophylaxis against that sort of thing with king h1, getting the king off that potentially dangerous diagonal. So f5 is still interesting to consider. Black now energetically plays on the queen side, it seems, with b4. White takes that. Bishop takes b4, and now rook ab1. Okay, the queen looks not too comfortable, but a5, no big deal it seems. Now the queen drops back to e2. Now here again, f5 is interesting. If f5 had been played here, e takes. We have an interesting position actually here. It seems black's got a tactic. Maybe Kasparov noticed. I'm not sure I understand it. I can't visualize it in advance. So, okay, this is going to be for 500 points. Black has a tactic here, apparently. I'm going to be honest. I can't exactly... Maybe I should be able to see it, but... it's been prompted that black has a tactic here if f5 had been played immediately. Hawkeye is flagging something. We have Hawkeye in Wimbledon tennis. It's noticed something here for black. Probably quite simple when you break it down. Black to play. Okay, I'm glad no one's screaming out for this tactic. It's not bishop c3, by the way. We can take that. We've got the rook protected. No, it's mentioning something here. Knight takes e4, and I'm wondering what? What? That is my reaction. What? If bishop takes? Oh crikey! What is going on here? This is unbelievable. Apparently it equalizes. This is computer stuff. This computer stuff. It's computer tactics. I'm not entirely sure this is the reason Kasparov wouldn't have played f5. I can't claim that, to be honest. Looking at this is just mean tactics. Okay, I have to show you, right? It's just mean tactics. Bishop d2, bishop d2, with the idea that if queen takes, we've got bishop takes e4, forking the unfortunate rooks. And if we protect the rooks, rook c2, and this is crushing. Queen b7 the strongest, and apparently this position is crushing. So say here bishop takes g2 is mating. And also the interesting thing about this as well is if queen f3, bishop takes e4, queen takes e4, and black has queen takes b2 with this back row now being emphasized. So if it takes, we've got back row mates. Now I cannot claim that this tactic is why Kasparov didn't play f5 here, to be honest. Until we see his notes for the game, I can't categorically say. What he did do in this position after a5 was to play queen e2. He didn't play f5 here. So just to run this through again, it seems f5 is not accurate because e takes, rook takes, knight takes e4. We're promoting that. That's the main variation. Knight takes e4 is a sort of bomb blast tactic. Which at least equalizes for black. Okay, so yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so Kasparov played Queen E2, right? He's still got F5 in reserve. And after Queen A7, now he plays F5. Yeah. there's no such dangers. He's strengthened this position. There's no such dangers here. Okay, so black plays Queen A8, putting pressure on E4 like that. If he takes, this is pleasant for white, pleasant enough for white. So actually Queen A8 is played. D5 extinguishes that pressure for a moment and actually opens up this potentially lethal bishop down the king side. I mentioned recently in a Fischer against Tal game of 1959 about black trying to put pressure down the centre to white's king, but unfortunately in this particular position white is very interested in doing the very same thing diagrammatically to black. When he plays D5, he's going right through the central squares to black's king. Black's trying to do the same to white's king. They're both trying to get at each other's kings through the centre on the diagonals, but white might be arguing his case a little bit more energetically here. After E takes D5, there's a strong move now available to Kasparov. Remember, going through the centre trying to attack the opponent's king. Centre is important, but here both see that as a stepping stone to get each other's king, the crown jewels. So white's play here, a very strong attacking move. Kind of. Yeah, I mean, it sets black a lot of problems in practice. What does Kasparov play here? Okay, not knight d7 apparently. I think we can just take that safely. There's no massive problem on g7 here. If queen g4, we just play f6. There's no massive problem there. No, this is the more challenging way. Just play knight g4. Now black did take it. Queen takes. And seemed to cement the king safety and the diagonal with f6. And this next move is not mentioned, by the way, by the engines, but Kasparov played it, and it seems very, very dangerous. I mean, when I say like really dangerous, it looks extremely dangerous for black. White to play, it is a kind of interesting attacking move. White to play here. Can you guess what Kasparov played? Okay, it's tempting either to play e5, isn't it? But there's another possibility. He didn't play e5 because maybe bishop c3. He played actually bishop takes f6, threatening a mate in 1. Rook takes, and now you've got these rolling pawns e5. This is setting some problems for black. Black plays rook h6 here. Maybe this might not have been the best defense. Maybe rook f7 was interesting to consider as well, but it still looks very dangerous after f6 because we've got e6 to follow. It looks really dangerous, these two pawns. But yeah, black, Ralph played rook h6. We have f6 again, threatening a mate in 1. Black defends with rook c7, but now the pawns, they look dangerous, they look scary after e6. Yeah. We have two really dangerous connected passed pawns. Which also, by the way, I answered someone on Reddit just earlier today about, oh, I'm lacking motivation to think really hard about chess positions. And I said something like, this is before seeing this game, I said something like, have a look at Chernev's Most Instructive Games of Chess. It's got a lot of strategic themes, and I mentioned things like connected passed pawns, and here it's like we've got connected passed pawns scenario, because this is the kind of spice you can aim for. These things are not really estimated by engines. There's a lot of spicy things in chess positions which cannot be estimated very easily by engines, and this is like one of those positions, because it's like king safety coming with dangerous connected passed pawns as well in the mix. Very, very difficult to estimate this. Now the engine likes white, and I'm wondering about the rook f7 defense. Maybe we should check that out after, but let's carry on with this game continuation. What is white threatening? White is immediately threatening e7 to disconnect the rook from g7, so we could threaten mate again. That's an immediate threat. Black plays queen d8, which might not help that much. e7 is played anyway, disconnecting the rook from g7. Black is giving up a whole rook now. This can't be good, can it? Okay, we have rook bc1. He has staved off immediate mating consequences, but white is now threatening rook c8 check. The king is awkwardly placed here with the rook here, not defending that much the king. So rook c8 is the immediate threat here. If something like rook f6, I don't think rook f6 would help. Black played queen d8, defending the c8 square directly. If black plays rook f6, let's have a look. We can play rook takes. Oh, there's a killing move in this position apparently. In this particular position, there'll be a killing move. Yeah, I think I see why. Let's have a tactical test here for a moment in this side variation. So just to recap, what I'm saying is black in the game played queen d8, but there's a problem here with rook f6 in that, I'll give you the first move, there's a problem here. What does white play in this position? There's actually a crushing blow in this position. Yeah. I think. Yeah, it must be. What does white play? Here we got a loose piece on b7. It seems queen d7. Give yourself 100 points before queen d7. Say the bishop moves here. Oh, queen takes d5 check. And if here we can take here, trying to deflect the king away from the queen. And this is just horrible. It's just horrible. Ends up losing a bishop there. Also, I'm not sure this is is it bishop f8? This is also strong. Rook f1. Yeah, because we're kind of winning the queen. If queen here, I think we end up winning the queen with a similar tactical idea of bishop takes h7. Yeah, winning the queen. So this is a double attack to force a major concession. Yeah, so this is also horrible. Yeah, just either is just winning. If queen f8 there, check, hits the bishop. And if here, actually we can take here first, trying to deflect the king away from the queen. Then we can just take on a6, winning a piece. and still threatening rook f1. So it's pretty disastrous after queen d7, it seems, in this line. So black actually played queen d8. Okay, so black played queen d8, and actually Kasparov plays the top move, it seems, in the position here. White's playing crush in this position. We're in a few moves away from the end of the game, actually. So white plays an ace in tennis. I don't know, come back to Wimbledon tennis. White's playing an ace. Bang! In this, there's no defense. There's no defense to this next move. It's an ace. What does he play? I suppose I'm not entirely sure why, but there's no defense apparently. Alright, he plays queen f5. Okay, now the immediate threat is queen f7 check to win the bishop. That bishop is a problem piece. Now, queen b8 was played. If black plays queen f, rook f6, there's no protection there. We just take here. Thanks very much. And this is not very nice at all for black. Loses the queen, for example. So yeah, queen f5 threatens queen f7, and also this is very useful on h7 as well. So queen b8 defends the bishop. But now we have check, king h8, and we're here at the final move of the game. Now with queen b8, also, this is threatened, right? Isn't it? Naughty. Which helps actually target your next move, which I hope all of you will get, because you're also faced with mate in 1. So this is limiting the number of good moves, right? We've got to address the mate in 1 here, guys. So I'm sure you're all going to get 100 points here for this final move of the game, which is both attacking, tick that box, and defending, tick that box. So find the move which is attacking and defending, and I've shown you the threat on h2. So white's play final move of the game. You're all going to get it. Come on, get your 100 points. Giving away 100 points. Giving away 100 points here. Yeah. Okay, so rook c7. It defends against that mate, yeah? That was threatened, yeah? I was just imagining it. Yeah. And we're hitting g7 and we're hitting b7, so it's a double attack as well. There's no defense here. Black resigned. If bishop f8, we just take on f8. That's a mate. Just taking on f8. If we try and defend over here, we end up just losing the bishop. Rook takes b7. It's pretty clear cut. This looks as though there's no defense, and funny enough, I don't think there is any defense. If rook takes h2, we can take here. I don't think this is too hot, because after g3 the back row is a problem. Even if black gets this, bang, back row is a problem. We get mated. Black gets mated, not we. Because whilst the opponent gets mated, either takes with the queen or rook. So there's no actual defense to rook c7. So Kasparov uses his pet system with a3 here. Let's have this in a nutshell. He got the nice pawn center. It seems he played f5 at a time there was no tactical disaster. Let's just say that. And black tried to put pressure on the center with queen a8, very fancy. But white has the same idea against black's king through the center, blasting at each other through the center, but white plays knight g4. Kasparov's bishop f6 is not estimated by the engines. Actually, let's go back why Houdini didn't like the concept at all. Houdini didn't mention this at all. This move, bishop takes f6, for the record. It's not mentioned. Alright? Now, let's just for the moment, let's have a look. Why? It's giving black with an advantage. It thought rook f7 was fine for black. Actually, it's changing its tune already to say it's at least equal now, this position. So this is why it didn't consider it, because of this defense. And this is why I would argue that if people are having problems with motivation, to check out books like Most Instructive Games of Chess Ever Played, because there's themes which engines just don't estimate very well, and connected past pawns here, it's already changed its tune to at least equal, right? So let's go with f6. It threatens e6. It's difficult. We're threatening e6. How does black defend this? Well, apparently the computer defense is rook c f8. And maybe it's got a point. Maybe it wasn't totally sound. I mean, there's nothing concrete actually here. If we play rook f4, we're keeping a lot of pressure there. We can build up. This might not be a forced win, but Kasparov is not playing computer. He played someone that played rook h6 in the game. This might not be a forced win, because black can always counter-sack a rook here. I think this is the point, and try and hold out like this. But it's scary looking positions. Scary. Maybe for both sides a bit. But yeah, this is the engine defense. King e5. King e5. Yeah. I don't know. This is crazy. You'd have to be a computer. If you play here, apparently, well, that's going to be losing. So yeah. If King e5 was needed, then this is not a position you want to play. If King e5 is the only thing, or King e6 to hold on. Oh, because we're attacking the rook. Yeah, apparently, yeah, the reason this is rejected, the whole thing, is because of rook f7. With the idea, it seems, of being able to double the rooks and counter-sack a rook sack. Kasparov's not playing computer, and that is scary stuff anyway. This stuff with ideas of bishop h7 and rook f4, rook h4. It's scary. It's just scary. So I think black's concern was about h7, and that probably explains his move. Actually, he wanted to keep an eye on h7, but there was other stuff going on after that, which is just dangerous. The queen is actually well posted on g4 for c8, as it turned out later. Stuff like that. But yeah, it's incredibly difficult to try and defend sometimes, especially against Kasparov. So that's why we're looking at his games. How did he break down all these players? Okay, so I hope this was interesting, and have a good week. And the over the board season starts soon, so some of us playing over the board a bit. Yeah, hope this is useful for that, maybe as well as your online chess if you play online, or whatever, just general interest. So see you next week. We're going to carry on another Kasparov thing next week, because these games are really quite fascinating and juicy as far as I can tell. I hope you do as well. So comments, questions, likes, appreciated. Thanks very much. Until next week. Okay, thanks for coming.